Some of the most important inventions in human history were never credited to the person who actually built them. Not because the inventor failed, not because they gave up, but because someone else just stole them. 4 inventors, 4 thefts. And in every single case, the person who took the credit became famous, while the person who did the work was forgotten. The telephone. In the 1860s, the telegraph existed, but it could only send Morse code, dots and dashes. What the world needed was a way to send the actual human voice through a wire. Dozens of engineers knew it was theoretically possible. Nobody had figured out how. Elisha Gray had been thinking about it for years. Gray was already one of the most respected electrical inventors in America. He had built devices that could send multiple telegraph signals through a single wire simultaneously, something engineers called impossible. By 1874, he turned his full attention to voice transmission. He believed the key was in vibration. Sound creates vibrations. Those vibrations could be converted into electrical signals, sent through wire, and converted back into sound on the other end. He spent 2 years building prototypes, running tests, documenting every result. By early 1876, he had a working design. Everything was documented. His lawyer had the papers ready. On February 14th, 1876, Gray sent his lawyer to the US Patent Office to file. That same morning, Alexander Graham Bell's lawyer walked into the same office with a patent for the same invention. Bell's lawyer arrived first, by 2 hours. Gray had the better design. He had documented his work months before Bell. The patent office's own records logged his submission the same day. None of it mattered. Bell was awarded the patent. Gray appealed over 600 times. Every appeal failed. Bell founded the Bell Telephone Company. Within 10 years, 150,000 Americans had a telephone. Gray spent the rest of his life in court. He died in 1901. Forgotten. Radio. In the 1880s, all communication required physical wire. Telegraph lines had to be laid across every mile of land. Ships at sea had no way to communicate at all. The idea of sending a signal through open air, with no wire, no physical connection, was considered theoretical at best. Most engineers dismissed it entirely. Nikola Tesla didn't. Tesla had been studying electromagnetic waves for years and believed that electrical energy could be transmitted wirelessly through the air itself. In 1891, he stood in a lecture hall in New York and lit a light bulb, with no wires connected to it. The room went silent, then erupted. Scientists who were present later said it was the most significant demonstration they had ever witnessed. Tesla spent the next 6 years turning that demonstration into a complete system. He built transmitters. He ran thousands of experiments. He mapped every frequency, every wavelength, every variable that affected how far a signal could travel. In 1897, the US Patent Office granted him the patents for radio signal transmission. In 1898, he demonstrated a radio-controlled boat before a crowd in New York, the world's first remote-controlled vehicle. The invention was complete. The patents were his. An Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi had been paying attention. Marconi had been working on wireless transmission for years and kept hitting technical walls. Then he studied Tesla's patents, 17 of them. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. He used Tesla's designs to build a transmitter powerful enough to send a signal across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1901, Marconi sent the first transatlantic radio signal. Overnight, Marconi was the most famous inventor alive. In 1909, Marconi won the Nobel Prize in Physics for the invention of radio. Tesla filed a lawsuit immediately. He had the original patents. He had the dates. The patent office reviewed the case and sided with Marconi anyway. Tesla spent the next 3 decades watching his invention make another man famous, while he died in poverty. In 1943, he passed away alone in a New York hotel room, broke, forgotten. Later that same year, the US Supreme Court overturned Marconi's patent. The radio had been Tesla's all along, but it was too late. He never found out. DNA. In the early 1950s, scientists knew that DNA carried genetic information, but nobody knew what it looked like or how it worked. The structure of DNA was the most important unsolved problem in all of biology. Crack it and you would understand how life itself was built, copied and passed from one generation to the next. Laboratories across the world were racing to solve it. Most were using chemical models and guesswork. Rosalind Franklin used X-rays. Franklin was one of the finest experimental scientists in Britain. Her specialty was X-ray crystallography, firing X-rays through crystal samples to photograph their internal molecular structure. The technique required extraordinary precision. Franklin was better at it than almost anyone alive. She prepared DNA samples with a level of care that other scientists in her own building could not match, controlling humidity levels, crystal preparations, and exposure angles down to fractions of a degree. Each photograph was sharper than the last. She was building towards something definitive. In May 1952, she produced Photo 51. It was the clearest X-ray image of DNA ever taken. Sharp, unambiguous, and precise enough to show that DNA had a double helix structure, 2 strands wound around each other in a spiral. Franklin knew exactly what she was looking at. She kept the image in her lab and continued her full analysis before publishing. She never got the chance. A colleague named Maurice Wilkins showed Photo 51 to James Watson without Franklin's knowledge. Watson saw it for less than a minute. He went back to his partner Francis Crick, and within weeks they had built their famous double helix model, using Franklin's image, her measurements, and her data. Their paper was published in April 1953. Franklin's contribution was a footnote. In 1962, Watson, Crick, and Wilkins won the Nobel Prize. Franklin had died 4 years earlier, aged 37. The Nobel is not awarded posthumously. She was never nominated. Watson later admitted in his autobiography that without Photo 51, they could not have solved it. The image that unlocked the structure of human life was taken by a woman whose name most people have never heard. The sewing machine. In 1841, making a single shirt by hand took over 14 hours. Every stitch was done manually. Factories employed hundreds of seamstresses, working from dawn to dusk just to meet basic demand. The clothing industry was desperate for a mechanical solution, but every attempt to build a sewing machine had failed. The problem always came back to the needle. Every design used a needle with the eye at the blunt end, the way a hand sewing needle works. Mechanically, it was impossible to pull thread through fabric that way. Elias Howe spent 5 years staring at that problem. Howe was a machinist with no money and one idea. His wife took in sewing work to keep them fed while he worked. He failed dozens of times. Then, one night, he had it. Moved the eye of the needle to the tip, not the blunt end. That single change made the whole mechanism work. Thread could now be pulled through fabric mechanically, looped, and locked into a stitch automatically. In 1846, he filed the patent. The first functional sewing machine in history. Then he spent 2 more years trying to sell it. Nobody wanted it. He came back from a failed sales trip to England, having pawned his patent rights just to afford the boat home. What he found when he arrived stopped him cold. While he had been away, Isaac Singer had studied Howe's design, made minor modifications, and was mass-producing the sewing machine across America under his own name. By the time Howe found out, Singer was already rich. Howe had nothing except the 1846 patent. He sued. In 1854, the court ruled in his favor. Singer was ordered to pay royalties on every machine sold. Singer built a 45-room mansion and died worth the equivalent of $120 million today. Howe funded a Civil War regiment with his royalties, then died in 1867 at 48. Unknown. Singer's name is still on the machines. Howe's isn't. Every one of these inventions changed the world, just not for the person who built it.